The Trump campaign is filing a petition for recounts in 2 Wisconsin counties. The president is specifically targeting Milwaukee and Dane counties in the recount request. CBS News projects President-elect Joe Biden has won Wisconsin by a margin of roughly 20,000 votes. President Trump is also continuing his post-election purge, firing the security official in charge of keeping his elections safe. Christopher Krebs drew the president's ire by praising the integrity of this year's election. His agency says the 2020 vote was both fair and accurate. But that undercuts the president's false claims and numerous lawsuits trying to overturn the results. CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang has the latest on those attempts.
Department of Homeland Security official Christopher Krebs became the latest member of the administration to be fired by tweet. Last night, President Trump posted that he terminated Krebs as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
You should have confidence in the integrity of the process.
Krebs has publicly defended the integrity of the November election. Just last week, his former agency signed on to a statement contradicting the president's baseless claims about election interference, writing there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. Krebs's firing came as new election drama unfolded in Michigan.
This is a disgrace.
A public Zoom call turned tense after 2 Republican canvassers in Wayne County, which includes Detroit, initially blocked the move to certify election results.
Shame on you. Shame on you for leading to this level of corruption. You have disavowed your right to even sit in the seats that you occupy.
The canvassers claimed votes in the polling book did not match the tabulated votes, but officials say that discrepancy can be common when turnout is high, and it doesn't necessarily mean votes were improperly cast or counted.
You talked about not certifying Detroit, even though you acknowledged that Livonia, a city, by the way, I know you know is 95% white, had bigger variances than Detroit, which is 80% black.
The panel ultimately changed course, unanimously certifying the presidential results. Still, President Trump praised the attempt to challenge the results, tweeting, "Having courage is a beautiful thing." The Trump administration has refused to cooperate in the transfer of power to President-elect Joe Biden. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell claimed the transition would be smooth despite the delay.
We're going to have an orderly transfer from this administration to the next one.
And on the floor of the Senate, Republican Lindsey Graham, who has not publicly acknowledged the election results, joined other senators congratulating Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. On Tuesday, Biden met with his own national security experts as the president continues to block access to government officials.
I've been unable to get the briefings that ordinarily would have come by now.
The Trump administration is moving ahead with withdrawing troops from Afghanistan and Iraq. The acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller announced the number of troops will be cut down to 2,500 in each country by mid-January. But U.S. allies and even members of President Trump's own party are saying now is not the right time, arguing that the Taliban has not met any conditions to justify a reduction in troops, such as cutting down the level of violence or breaking with al-Qaeda. Weijia Jiang, CBS News, the White House.
Let's bring in CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reid now. Hi, Paula. So we'll get to Krebs in just a moment, but first, the Trump campaign has filed for a recount of 2 Wisconsin counties, Milwaukee and Dane. Why is he targeting those counties specifically?
These are 2 of the state's most populous counties, Tanya, and they allege that these were the source of the, quote, worst irregularities. They make a series of allegations about how ballots were mishandled, but have not presented evidence to back up those claims. The immediate impact of just selecting these 2 counties, though, is a big savings for the campaign. To do a recount in the entire state would cost about $8 million, but by doing just these 2 counties, they save about $5 million because the price tag for this smaller mini recount is just $3 million. But at this point, it's just not really clear how a recount would actually adjust the outcome or substantially change the results here.
All right, so let's talk about Krebs' firing then. Is his departure a surprise, and could there be further departures on the horizon?
Well, it's certainly not a surprise, Tanya. Many people were looking at this as a possibility, particularly after Krebs came out with comments that contradicted the party line here at the White House. In fact, in the president's tweet when he issued this firing, he directly tied the decision to Krebs' statement that there was, quote, no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was compromised in any way. Obviously, the White House, the Trump campaign, they have been beating this drum, suggesting that there was widespread fraud, even though they have not been able to present evidence to actually support that. And we've seen judges across the country tossing these cases because they have not presented any support. So it did not come as a surprise. We know, we've seen in this administration, if you contradict the president, you might very well lose your job. Right now, though, there are a lot of folks who are looking at the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, and wondering if his job is secure. FBI directors, they are supposed to serve for a term of 10 years. We've seen, of course, the president already fired now former FBI director James Comey when the two could not see eye to eye on why Comey shouldn't help the president in the Mueller investigation and the ongoing Russia investigation. So a lot of folks are looking at Chris Wray because the president has publicly not been willing to fully endorse and express confidence in the FBI director, and has expressed frustration that he does not believe he has been supportive enough in these political investigations that the president would like to see pursued. Tanya, the president still has 2 months left in office. We know he'll be here through the Thanksgiving holiday, and people are absolutely looking at whether he'll use that time to carry out more of these sort of vendettas against people he does not believe have been supportive. He has the power to fire many of these officials who he's displeased with.
And so, Paula, while the president perhaps continues to fixate on these vendettas and on the election, the coronavirus is still raging. Here's the message that White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany presented earlier today on Fox News. Let's listen.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guidelines you're seeing are Orwellian. Let me start by saying the CDC has put out considerations as we prepare to go about Thanksgiving, about socially distancing, wearing masks, doing what you can. There's a whole list, a page of very good considerations, and in that they say we're not recommending a certain number of people, but we are giving considerations that you should put in place. And I think that's the American way. The American people know how to protect their health.
So McEnany's comments about lockdowns being Orwellian appear to be somewhat at odds with what you're hearing White House doctors are telling Vice President Pence in coronavirus task force meetings. What can you tell us about their latest meeting?
That's right. Many Americans, when they think about how to protect their health, they look to doctors, they look to health experts. And we know in speaking with several of the health experts who are on the coronavirus task force in a meeting yesterday, they warned the vice president that the situation is dire. They warned that there could be up to 2,000 deaths a day by Christmas if more measures are not taken by the federal government to encourage a mitigation. A death rate at that level, Tanya, could, of course, completely overrun hospitals, take us back to the darkest days of the pandemic earlier this year. Now, as one of the mitigation measures, the task force officials, they are encouraging no more indoor dining, no more indoor events, but they are still open to having schools remain in session. They believe that so far the data they're looking at suggests that the transmission rate in schools has not been high enough to justify their closures. And really interesting, Tanya, they really pressed the vice president to have him or the president come out and endorse more mitigation measures to encourage people to socially distance, to wear masks. But so far, there has really been no message on mitigation from the White House over the past several weeks, arguably the past several months. Dr. Deborah Birx, though, she has been touring many states. She has made dozens and dozens of trips across this country. So really, at this point, it appears that the messaging has fallen to her, as the vice president nor the president seem to want to carry this message.
And we've only seen the task force then relaying information directly to state and local officials. We haven't seen any more of these public task force briefings that, you know, arguably a lot of Americans would appreciate right now.
Absolutely, Tanya. That's why it's important for us to have our sources on the task force. So after they have meetings, we can call them and try to get answers and information like that dire warning. What's interesting is our White House producer, Sarah Cook, she obtained several reports that the task force actually sent to state and local officials, and they are just as concerning. One dated November 15th says there is, quote, aggressive and unrelenting, expanding broad community spread across the country, and urges state and local leaders to increase and to step up their mitigation efforts. But, you know, at the same time, Tanya, while this White House has tried to tell the states that they're in charge of the COVID response, they're not going to get any direction or really much assistance from the federal government or the White House. You saw on Sunday, Dr. Scott Atlas, the president's really one of his top COVID advisors, someone who shares a lot of his beliefs, is willing to tell him what he wants to hear. He was on Twitter telling people to rise up against the governor of Michigan. So we asked him, we said, how can you say it's up to the states and you come out and you contradict the states? Once again, what we have seen consistently throughout this pandemic response is mixed messages, contradictory statements coming from this administration.
Absolutely. Paula, Reid at the White House, thank you.